The sheriff locked himself in the deepest cell, then threw the key out the next second. When his colleague entered, he found the sheriff staring blankly out the window. The colleague warned the sheriff not to do anything foolish, but the sheriff still said the words he shouldn't have. However, no one who said those words survived. It turned out that in the future, humans lived 1,500 meters underground. There was a special rule there. Anyone who uttered even 2 words would be forcibly sent to, on the surface. During cleanup missions, everyone who went was poisoned by the toxins of the outside world. But the sheriff still resolutely uttered that taboo phrase, precisely because of his wife's mysterious death 3 years prior. That day, his wife shouted in the restaurant that the outside world was actually a paradise of birdsong and fragrant flowers. The ruins everyone saw on the screen were actually deliberately altered footage by the leadership, intended to imprison people here forever. She had no intention of leaving, but seeing that no one showed any remorse, she uttered that taboo word. Thus, her husband, the sheriff, had no choice but to personally escort her to the ground to test the shears. The crowd in the bunker watched Ellie's departure via live stream. After leaving the bunker, Ellie wiped the bunker's cameras with a woolen cloth, excitedly believing that the outside world was finally survivable. But unexpectedly, she collapsed to the ground after only 2 steps, unable to move again. The hopes in everyone's hearts were shattered once again. However, only the sheriff knew that his wife had told him before she left that if she could survive in the outside world, she would turn back and wipe the security camera. Therefore, his death must have another reason. In order to find out the truth, the sheriff also said, "If you want to go out, then go." So the mayor put protective clothing on him and sent him out. He walked down a long staircase towards the ground world, but after the gate of the treasure opened, he was plunged into the outside world. Deeply shaken, the world was truly as his wife had described. A scene of swaying rain, fragrant flowers, and even birds flying in the air. He desperately wanted to see it. The people inside the geotonic camera also knew the truth, so they desperately turned back and ran towards the geotonic camera, wiping the dust off with a woolen brush. However, the geotonic's large screen displayed a completely opposite image. What people saw was the sheriff also going to that ruin. As the sheriff walked step by step towards his wife, he hadn't walked far from the body when he felt dizzy and lightheaded. The sheriff suspected the real poison might be hidden inside his isolation suit. So he did something no one had ever done before. He removed his helmet. But his condition was already very poor, and he soon collapsed beside his wife. His hope of survival on the road was shattered once again. Only one woman realized that the sheriff must have had a reason for removing his helmet before he died. It turned out, the night before, she led the sheriff to an abandoned cave entrance. Inside, they found the walls covered in strange drawings and writings. She seemed used to it all. Then, she led the sheriff through a hole to a platform. After turning on the lights, she was horrified to see a gigantic digging machine. She guessed that the machine had encountered an accident while digging, which was why previous inhabitants had used concrete to fill the hole. The place was sealed off. He and the sheriff climbed down the ladder by the wall, took out a camera from a small box, and then followed the fishing line forward. Finally, They pulled out a cloth bag from behind a metal plate. Inside was the hard drive that the sheriff's wife had found. It contained video footage of the real world outside and handwritten notes from when he cracked the hard drive. Upon seeing this, the sheriff quickly tried to take everything away to destroy it, but he was unwilling. He roared, "Sheriff, if he had listened to his wife, perhaps he wouldn't have died." Upon hearing this, the sheriff instantly became frightened, because his wife had always been a source of anxiety for him. The sheriff instructed Juliet to keep a low profile from then on, because if the higher-ups found out about this, they would all face the death penalty. After saying this, he took the hard drive and the decoded copy and went back. Later, he received news that the sheriff had been exiled. Immediately afterward, he returned to the platform. Unexpectedly, he had concealed from the sheriff the secrets of the lower levels. He had come here intending to investigate, only to find that the area below was already submerged. He had always had a fear of deep water, but with such a serious incident, he couldn't care less about anything else. He secured the rope, used his headlamp for light, and slowly climbed down. Due to the tension in midair, his headlamp fell down. He had no choice but to grope his way down in the darkness. Just as he was about to touch the water, the generator on the deck suddenly malfunctioned. As the person in charge of the generator, he immediately called back and saw the apprentice about to go in to repair it. Alice immediately stepped forward to stop her. Seeing that the apprentice did not move, he punched her to the ground. After the generator crisis was resolved, the boss went straight to Juliet and scolded her for drinking, being hungover, missing work for 2 hours, and even beating and scolding her apprentice, who greatly admired her. But at this moment, she said something very serious. The generator of the geothermal treasure had a very serious problem and had to be turned off. Only then could the problem be completely solved. But the boss said that the generator had never been turned off in the history of the Devil Machine. This would deprive everyone inside and outside the Devil Machine of light. Even 5 minutes of darkness would cause panic, and the boss could not bear this responsibility. Juliet, however, insisted that being trapped in darkness for a short time was much better than the complete destruction of the generator, leading to the Devil Machine's demise. Ultimately, the order from top management was that they could only continue to make simple repairs to the generator. It was at this moment, a sudden, high-voltage malfunction in the generator caused the entire underground level to shake violently. The mayor happened to arrive and learned of the generator failure. The experienced Juliet decisively entered the generator to repair it. Her normal operation was observed by the mayor, who approved of her and immediately decided to appoint her as the new sheriff. However, Juliet's actions were unexpected. I rejected the request without thinking. Pause podcast.